The last meal. The night was bitterly cold, and the streets of Fort Dawson, a small military town tucked away in the Midwest, were nearly deserted. Snow whipped across the sidewalks, covering the footprints of the few who dared to walk home that late. Streetlights flickered, casting uneven halos of light that seemed too weak to push back the darkness. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell pulled her army coat tighter around her body. Her boots were cracked from years of use, her gloves thin and worn. She hadn't had a proper meal in days. Her paycheck had been delayed again, and what little money she had managed to keep had already been wired to her mother and younger sister in Oklahoma. In her pocket, wrapped carefully in a piece of napkin, she carried her only food, half a roll of bread left over from the base cafeteria. It wasn't much, but to her it meant something. It meant she could silence the hunger in her stomach just long enough to fall asleep. It meant that, at least for tonight, she could hold on. As she crossed an empty street, her eyes caught movement near the old bus shelter across from the shuttered diner. A man sat there, hunched over, his coat nothing more than a bundle of torn rags. His hair was long, gray, and unkempt, his face lined with the deep creases of hardship. His hands shook as he tried to warm them with his breath. Sarah slowed down, her heart already bracing against the inevitable. The man lifted his head, and his pale blue eyes met hers. His voice was broken, rasping like an old radio barely able to find a signal. "Miss, do you have anything to eat?" Sarah stopped. The bread in her pocket suddenly felt heavier than stone. Her stomach growled violently, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since dawn. She could almost taste the dry bread, almost imagine the small comfort it would bring. For a moment, selfishness whispered to her, "Keep it, Sarah. No one will know. No one will care." But another voice rose inside her, louder, steadier. The voice of the oath she had sworn, the uniform she wore, the father she had lost. She took a deep breath, reached into her pocket, and pulled out the half roll of bread. Slowly, she crossed the street and held it out. The man's hands trembled as he took it. He looked at the bread as though it were gold, then lifted it to his mouth and took a small, grateful bite. For a few moments he chewed in silence, then lifted his head again. His eyes locked on hers, sharp now, almost burning. And then he whispered, so softly Sarah almost thought she imagined it, "Mitchell, I've been waiting for you." Her blood ran cold. That name, her name, spoken with such certainty by a stranger. She staggered a step back, her heart pounding. "What did you just say?" The man swallowed hard, his voice still ragged but steady with intent. "Your father, Captain David Mitchell. He saved my life once, and he told me, if the day ever came when I met his daughter, I'd know exactly what to say." Sarah's breath caught. Her father had died 15 years ago on a mission in Afghanistan. At least that's what the army had told her. She had been only a child then, holding her mother's hand at the funeral, staring at the folded flag they pressed into her arms. All she had left of him was a photo in uniform and the words he used to say at bedtime. "Real courage doesn't make noise, Sarah. It just endures." Tears welled in her eyes as she stumbled closer. "That's impossible. My father, he's gone." The man shook his head slowly. "Gone? No. Men like him don't just vanish. He left behind more than a uniform, more than a memory. He left a promise. And tonight, when you gave away your last meal to a stranger, I saw him in you. The same fire, the same quiet strength." Sarah felt her knees weaken. The wind howled through the street, but for a moment, it was silent between them. She searched his face for answers, for proof, for something real. "How do you know him? How do you know me?" The man reached into his ragged coat and pulled out a small, weathered object wrapped in cloth. With trembling fingers, he handed it to her. She unfolded the fabric, and inside lay a tarnished dog tag. The letters were scratched, but still clear enough to read. "Capt. David Mitchell." Sarah gasped. Her hands shook as she held it. She had never seen this tag before, not at the funeral, not in the belongings returned to her mother. This was something new, something her father had carried until the end. Her vision blurred with tears as the man's voice broke the silence again. He saved me during that mission, pulled me out of the fire when everyone else thought I was gone. He told me, "One day you'll meet my daughter, and when you do, tell her, courage runs in her blood." The dog tag trembled in her palm. Her chest ached with a mix of grief and pride so powerful it nearly crushed her. For 15 years she had carried the weight of not knowing, of questions without answers. And now, here was a piece of truth, handed to her on a freezing night by a starving man she nearly walked past. She sank to her knees in front of him, the snow soaking through her uniform, her breath ragged. "Why me? Why now?" she whispered. The old man's eyes softened. "Because heroes don't always wear medals, Lieutenant. Sometimes, they're just daughters who give their last piece of bread to a stranger." Sarah closed her eyes, clutching the dog tag to her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel hungry. She felt full with pride, with love, with the unshakable bond of a father she had thought she'd lost forever. The night around them remained cold, but inside her, something warm had been lit, and it would never go out again.